Hey everyone, welcome to Keto and Crime. Today I'm coming at you. If you're watching this live, you're seeing it, or not live, but on the day it releases, you're watching this on Tuesday, May 7th, covering what happened Monday, May 6th in the Daybell trial. So my name is Tracy. I run this channel. We do true crime, dark history, horror movies. We also discuss current court cases. And my thing is I try to break everything down into as short a summary as possible. I also do a holiday tree, currently stuck on Cinco de Mayo. That will be changing soon. But with that being said, let's dive into what happened yesterday, Monday, May 6th, in the Daybell trial. All right, so the first witness back on the stand is a special Steve Daniels, continuing his testimony from Friday. So Rob Wood is continuing the direct exam. They're showing satellite videos of the search area where the bodies were found on the Daybell's property. And then they're explaining how they removed the soil, the vegetative layer, and then they show pictures of, on Friday we saw pictures of the bucket and Tylee's remains. Now we're seeing pictures of JJ's remains, which was pretty much a whole piece, whereas Stylee was cut up and partially burned. I can't even believe I'm having to say those words about a 17-year-old and how old was JJ? 6? Just, or excuse me, what, 10? What? Anyway, Pryor does object to these photos. There's a quick sidebar, but they are allowed to continue to be up there. Daniels points out all the stones and how things were precisely removed, and then it shows the 2 wooden planks. So you had vegetative, dirt, stones, wooden planks, and then the remains were underneath the planks. So this was layered, and he's showing the planks and approximately where the remains were found. He says it was found wrapped in plastic, and then when they saw the pajamas and everything, they knew it was JJ. And then they show the duct tape and where how the things were on JJ's body, stuff that we all know. I don't want to rehash all of that, to be quite honest. And then they talk about what his impression was about them being buried in 2 separate places. But for some reason they split them up, and they think it was just to be able to mask, whereas JJ was buried down at a pond where we just found out last week that Chad was considering putting a mobile home over that spot. Convenient. And that Tylee was in the pet cemetery, which had dead pets in it, so they wouldn't have necessarily been unusual for remains of something to be found in that area. Anyway, sorry, this is just truly disturbing to me today. I'm sorry. And so Pryor now cross-examines. He goes over the search of Alex Cox's apartment. And so basically I'll just break this down for you really quickly. What happens in this entire cross-examination is Pryor basically trying to pin everything on Lori and on Alex, that they acted of their own volition, and Chad was just an innocent little angel that they used his property to hide the bodies. That's what it basically boils down to. Daniels is talking about how many officers covered it, that Chad's reaction to everything, but basically I can break it down to him trying to pin it all on Lori and Alex. They acted alone, and they just used Chad for a place to dispose of the bodies. Pretty cut and dry, in my opinion. And then they talk a little bit about the excavation, how they took the gardening tools and everything, the shovels and the pickaxes and the hose and everything, into custody. And they go over some of the pictures. So just more rehash of the same, again, trying to remove Chad from knowing anything about it. And then Pryor tenders the witness, and Wood has a very brief redirect. He asks him a few more pointed questions about how the things were, packaged for transport and things of that nature. And then the next witness is called by Lindsay Blake for the prosecution, and it is Melanie Pawlowski. the niece of 𝗟𝗏, ex-wife of Brandon Boudreaux. They talk about her relationship with Lori, how they were very close, and she developed a very close relationship with Chad, even calling him Dad. I mean, being that Melanie's sister, Melanie's mother, who's Lori's sister, passed away, Lori had always had a special place in their relationship, and that's a great thing. But then that kind of transfixed over to Chad, it appears, which is weird. I don't even want to think about what hanky-panky may have gone on there. Sorry, I just really don't like these people. I'm just all over the place today. But and then they talk about Chad and Lori's relationship, the light doctrine, the whole zombie doctrine, the scale, and that all came from Chad. The casting out spirits, Melanie says that all came from Chad. That they did do a casting on Charles Vallow, trying to get Ned Schneider out of him. She also talked about when Chad labeled 𝗙lie and JJ as dark. And then Blake just kind of keeps circling about, making sure that we all know that all these dark ideas were Chad's. And because I think Blake knows what Pryor's going to try to do. Again, he's going to try to pin everything on Alex and Lori, keeping Chad out of it. At least as far as the children, he's kind of backed himself into a wall with Tammy, but with the children, he thinks he has a better chance of deflecting. So that's what she's trying to do. She's trying to circumvent that and show that the idea for dealing with light and dark spirits, which we know the children were labeled, came from Chad. It's like the whole Charles Manson argument. I never killed anybody, but he told them to go up there. There would never have been deaths if he hadn't have implanted the ideas in their head. That's what Blake is going for here, in my opinion. And then they talk about how she found out about the death of Charles from her uncle, Adam Cox. She said she had no idea about it, and that she was just told that he and Alex got into a fight and Alex shot him in self-defense. Blake then asked Melanie if she ever asked Lori why she was moving to Rexburg, and she said that Lori told her several different things, but mainly she said Lori was going into hiding, both because of the end of times and also because she said that the Woodcocks were after JJ. She said she visited Lori in Rexburg at the end of September 2019 and stayed in her aunt's apartment. She said she did not see JJ or 𝗙lie there. That is when Melanie Gibb, that she did not see Melanie Gibb or David Warwick, even though that is roughly the time frame they were there. And that she asked Lori where 𝗙lie was, and she said she got a few different answers from Lori, but that one that she was doing her own thing at college and wasn't coming home very much. She said when she asked about JJ, Lori said she had hired a nanny who was taking care of JJ, or she was with, friends in Arizona, or that, he just wasn't there. He was on a play date. There was always a different excuse for why she never saw JJ. She said that she never saw Lori take a phone call or a FaceTime with JJ or 𝗙lie. She said when they went to Hawaii, they were not there, and she never saw either Chad nor Lori talk on the phone or have any sort of communication with the children. And then she talks about when she found out that Tammy Daybell had passed away, and that then they started planning their trip to go to Hawaii to get married. Then they talk about more about the zombie scale, light, dark, and how people were labeled. Then they talk about how that whole thing worked, about how you had a certain amount of time to cast out this evil spirit to return the body to its normal, or that the body would have to be killed to free the soul of the person that was possessed. And that's kind of where they landed and how we got here. Then they talked about the day that the apartments were searched and any questioning that she went through with the police. I noticed during this entire thing that Blake danced around the whole Brandon Boudreaux issue. I think they're trying really hard not to bring that in so that there could be a case for an appeal or a huge objection later. So she kind of danced around the whole Brandon Boudreaux and never really brought him into it. They focused number one on 𝗙lie and JJ. And now Pryor's cross-examining. He asked her about the Hawaii trip, and was talking about how that was pre-planned, and that was Lori's idea. Melanie said she wasn't sure who planned it. It was just planned, and they went. And then he asked her about her when she lived in Arizona and how far she was from Lori. She said, I lived about 12 minutes. And that when she first met Chad at the Preparing a People event, Pryor then asked Melanie to explain Preparing a People. She said she didn't know much about it, but Chad was speaking there, and it was an LDS-based prepper society for people that were pretty sure that the end of the world was coming very shortly. And she said that a lot of the people there were Mormon, though that was not exclusively Mormon. He asked her about a society known as the Seven Gatherers. She said that does not ring a bell with her, but she has heard the term before. And then he asked her, did a lot of the information you know about Chad, what Chad said, what Chad believes, did all that come from Lori? And she said a good deal of it was, but also Chad spoke pretty liberally about his beliefs as well, including the light and dark and who was light versus who was dark. Then they talk a little bit about Julie Rowe, and she said she never met Rowe, but she did listen to some of her podcasts. She said that she personally never participated in Gibbs' podcast, but she did listen to it, and that she did get invited and participate in a few castings at the behest of Lori and Chad. Then basically he just goes over more of the doctrine, and he brings up Melanie Gibb a whole lot. And I think, again, he's trying to deflect onto anybody but Chad in a lot of his questioning. And then they talk more about zombies, about her move to Idaho, and then Pryor basically is trying to twist her into saying that Lori invented some of this instead of Chad, but Melanie's pretty discreet on most of it came from Chad. And then Pryor rests. Blake does quickly redirect and ask if she had ever heard about zombies in the mainstream LDS faith. Melanie says no. Blake then asks if Lori and Chad lived together in Arizona. She said no, or lived together in Idaho, and Lori says no, they had separate apartments. And then they talk more about light and dark, and then Blake just asked pointedly, are JJ and 𝗙𝗏 labeled dark? He asked if JJ and 𝗙𝗏 were designated as dark, and she said yes. She said, was Charles designated as dark? Yes. Are any of them and none of them are still alive, correct? Correct. Slam dunk, mic drop, Lindsay Blake. Pryor has no redirect, and the next witness is Melanie's husband, 𝗂𝗏𝗀𝗀. Blake is asking him about how he met Melanie, Lori, and Chad. They met through their prepper beliefs. They said they first met in Lori's Rexburg apartment. He had met Alex that night. He met Alex the night he and Melanie got married, November 30th, 2019. Remember, because there was this whole big thing of Alex and Zulema and them going to Las Vegas to get married. And that Chad gave them a blessing via Zoom and said it was really, they were preparing for the end times. Ian was 100% caught up in that. Then they asked about their marriage, where they lived, a few little things. Melanie shared some things the night of their marriage, he said, that caused him concerns. The next morning, he was playing with his daughter, he was playing hide and seek with his daughter, and that he couldn't find her for 5 minutes, and it really worried him. So then he got to thinking about JJ and 𝗙𝗏, and were concerned because no one had seen them, and the last he heard about them, they had been labeled as dark. He said he went to law enforcement on December 5th, 2019, or December 4th or 5th, 2019, and they asked, and they recorded their conversation. He told them everything he knew about Chad, Lori, and Alex. And then he talked about the day he learned Alex had died. And then Ian said he had the apartment across the street from Melanie's in Rexburg in 2019. When they got married, they both moved into Melanie's apartment, and that Chad basically told Ian that he and Melanie should leave as soon as possible to get away from law enforcement. So it's pretty obvious that Ian and Melanie, to save their own ass, have totally flipped on Chad and Lori. And then Blake asked to admit into evidence some recordings that Ian made of everybody's conversations while they were on. He was on his honeymoon with Melanie in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. These recordings had never been played before. There's 87 minutes, but we will only hear portions. Then I'm going to kind of describe what I could hear of the recordings. Remember, this is on a live stream. It's talking about, it's Alex and Zulema talking about Dave not buying anything. Me and David Warwick. Ian says that Gibb and David were going to step away because things were getting too hot. And then a female calls somebody Raphael, and Ian says that she was actually referencing Chad, Raphael the angel. Lori and Chad then join the call, and Melanie is sobbing. Ian says Melanie was relieved to hear their voice. Chad and Lori would call in and then disappears for days and weeks at a time. There was all this talk about them possibly having been arrested. All this is when things were getting really hot. And that Ian said that he did not expect them to be there. And then they play another portion of the call. We hear Melanie talking about emotional attacks on certain people and how these were from Satan, and that Ian said he was not aware of any sorts of these attacks before meeting Melanie. And then they play another portion where Melanie talks about Lieutenant Ball bringing her banana bread. She was worried he might be poisoning her. Lori said he's probably good, but Hope and 𝗓𝗄𝗃 are the bad ones. Remember, we've heard from all of these law enforcement people. So now that there's questioning involved in the disappearance of JJ and Tylee, these people are all dark too. Blake then plays another part of the recording that says where Melanie says she hasn't trusted Gibb, and Lori says she can no longer be trusted because she called the police, and that it's not going to go anywhere but bad for any of us. And then Blake asks Ian to kind of expand on that, and he says that the primary reason that Melanie called was because Lori had told law enforcement that JJ was with her in Arizona, and she wanted to clear that up. And then there's a lot of discussion on the recordings about David being a bad influence on Melanie, referring to David Warwick. And then there's another recording played where Melanie is talking with Chad and Lori. Chad said he was worried that law enforcement were still watching her, and that Ian had already spoken with the police, and they knew they were looking for JJ and Tylee. And then there's another part where Chad pretty much tells Melanie that that law enforcement's not going to leave her alone, and it's time for both Ian and her to leave Rexburg to get away, and that the whole county is now cursed. And then basically just he said they need to leave the state. They need to get as far away from the state as they can, and they even forced them to look at Zillow listings and rental listings in other states because Idaho is now wicked that everybody has turned on Chad and Lori. Basically, he said turned on God, but we know what he means. And then they basically settle on Idaho Falls because it has good prices for rentals, even though they were looking at places in other states. And then Chad is just completely hammering home on this recording how they need to get as far away from Rexburg as possible. And then there's a lunch break, and we come back, and then they play the recording where Chad's telling them to leave again, and then he's telling them that everything is dark here, they need to get out. I mean, it's just a rant. It's a whole-on rant. Then they go to another part of the recording where Melanie calls Chad Dad, and that says she went and withdrew $50,000, and then she asked Chad and Lori for a combined blessing for her and Ian. And then Lori basically warns her, saying, we don't know what Ian knows or what his whole belief system is. And Melanie defends her new husband by saying Ian knows everything, and he agrees. he says that Ian says it was their religious beliefs and their goals in this world, just like it was. Ian had learned about light and dark, and he believed all of it, and he does understand all of it. And then they talk a little bit about 𝗠𝗂𝘀𝗶 and Alex and the blessings that Chad gave them, and they talk more about their mission to cleanse the earth from darkness and to remove as many of the zombies as they can, because the end is coming soon, and they will cleanse Mother Earth with earthquakes, moving mountains, changing rivers, and healing the hearts of mankind. So, veritable little Moses up in here. Then they talk about curses and the darkness that are on them, and that Chad is telling them that the Savior will be very pleased that they are all part of the 144,000. And then they talk more about the portals that Chad said he could step through, and that Chad and Lori basically setting themselves up as a celestial, an earthbound police force or God during the last days. And then they skip to a recording that Blake plays, that it's one that Ian made on the day 𝗟𝗀𝗃 died. It's about an hour long. Then the first portion is Melanie talking with Lori, Melanie Gibb, and David Warwick, and then we hear Lori saying she talks to him, referring to Alex God every night, and then another portion is Melanie saying that she's worried her phone is being tracked, basically talking about how they're all under surveillance by law enforcement, which, in all honesty, they were. And then we hear Alex Cox. He's crying. They're telling him that the next step of his mission is about to begin, and that they love him and to fear not, and that everything will be okay. And then Chad tells Ian that he's a powerful man because he's on the Lord's team. And I know you're struggling with your ex-wife, Ian's ex-wife, but the Lord will be with you, that you and Melanie are powerful warriors. And then, of course, you can hear Lori sobbing on the other end as well. Lori says Melanie and her children will be in New Jerusalem. Note, no mention of Brandon Boudreaux. And Lori said, and then they say the Lord is coming soon, if they are part of the #1 team for God. And then Chad seals them all in a blessing and tells Melanie she will feel angels that night. Melanie thanks them. And then Blake asks Ian what they were referring to, and they talk about removing weapons and curses and cutting negative cords. Ian says he never heard those things before this particular meeting, this particular group, and he doesn't really remember it before this particular recording. And then they play another recording where Melanie is talking with Lori about whether they're going to Arizona or not. She isn't sure. Melanie says she doesn't want Brandon to know about Alex's death. And then she basically wants Brandon to be in fear of Alex the rest of his life. So, yeah, these are really people. And then there's another recording where Lori says Tammy was visiting them to say how ridiculous the Rexburg police was. Tammy has already died, so they're saying that Tammy's ghost is coming to them through the veil and saying, oh, this is ridiculous, that I died of natural causes, and that all they can do is move forward and trust in the Lord. And so far, that's how it goes back. Just a whole lot of example of how delusional this group is. They literally believe they're talking with dead people. And then there's a short break. They come back. They talk more about when Chad and Lori got married, and when Ian and Melanie got married. And then basically Pryor is cross-examining. He asks if Melanie was close with her aunt, and he says absolutely. They were like mother and daughter. And then Pryor asks about Garrett Smith, and he kind of tells what he knows about that. And then Pryor asks if he's aware of when Melanie Gibb went to the police. He says it doesn't know the exact time frame, but knows that it happened right after the welfare checks began. Pryor asks if Chad ever told him he intended to kill the kids. Ian responds no, but that would be foolish for anybody to say that. Pryor asks Ian if castings are new or unique to the LDS faith. Ian says no, that they've been took, a few things like that have been took back in doctrine, but exorcism has been part of a lot of religions for a long time, so that's nothing unusual. And then Pryor asked him to explain the three kingdoms, the telestial, the terrestrial, and the celestial. He explains the differences. He asked about the 144,000 and was Chad a leader or just part of the group? And Ian says, according to Chad, he took a leadership role in the 144,000. Pryor asked if Ian understood that Alex knew he was going to die. Ian says, I don't know. There seemed to be a whole lot of implication that Alex, in the end of November, early December, was not long for this world. Pryor asks about the lengthy blessings and asks if that's unusual. And Ian says, no, long blessings are not unusual as far as LDS goes. They ask about the comments that they made about the law enforcement. They said they were very paranoid, and no, they did not like any of the law enforcement officials that were obviously watching them. And then Blake comes on to redirect, and she asks Ian who Melanie was talking about when she referred to dark law enforcement. And she said that they were talking about all the agents that had, all the local police that had been investigating them, and that Chad and Lori were animate. All of them were dark. And then this is where we end for the day. I'll be back soon. I'll be back tomorrow on Wednesday, May 8th, to go over what happened today, Tuesday, May 7th, in the Chad Daybell trial. And until next time, keto and cry.